Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive. And for a while, I could not enter, for the way was barred.
The famous opening lines of David Selznick's screen version of Daphne du Maurier's novel Rebecca. To direct the film that would win an Oscar as the best picture of 1940, Selznick brings English director Alfred Hitchcock to America. The voice speaking the opening lines is that of Joan Fontaine.
I met Mr. Selznick long before the world had really heard of Rebecca. So I was dining at someone's house, and a very attractive young man was sitting next to me. And I asked him if he'd read Rebecca, and he said, well, it's strange you should mention it, because I bought it today. Then he introduced himself, told me that he was a producer, which I didn't even know, and would I like to test for the role? Well, naturally, I wanted to, but I also had later been informed by my agent that everybody else in town was also going to test, and indeed they did.
Selznick, 15.
Quiet, speed.
You do such extraordinary things, such as calling on the bishop's wife and sitting on the edge.
Loretta Young is among the many who test for the coveted role of the second Mrs. De Winter.
I can't help it if I'm shy. And I do hate being looked at as if I were a prize cow.
Who looks at you that way?
Everyone.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know. Why do you look at me that way?
What do you mean?
I don't know.
Margaret Sullivan.
Why do you look at me like that?
Who's been talking to you?
No one at all. Why do you look like that? What's the matter?
Why did you say what you just did?
I tell you, I don't know, because you criticized me for being shy. I didn't mean anything, Maxim. Really, I didn't. Why do you say these things to me?
Vivian Lee tests with the picture's star, Laurence Olivier.
You are my father, my brother, and my son. All these things.
I'm difficult to live with. You don't get much fun, do you?
I can't help being shy. I do hate people looking at me up and down as if I were a prize cow.
Who looks you up and down?
Everyone.
Well,
Joan Fontaine.
gives them some interest in life.
Well, why must I be the one to supply the interest and take all the criticism?
Because life at Mandel is the only thing that interests anybody here.
She seemed to be shy, a nervous type, and her test did turn out to be better than any of the others.
Here, have this. Put it over your head.
Thank you.
David insisted that we should follow the book exactly. He had decided that with so many readers who had their favorite scenes, if they weren't included in the film, they would be disappointed.
That's it. That's Manderley.
Why don't you leave Manderley? He doesn't need you. He's got his memories. He doesn't love you. He wants to be alone again with her.
Judith Anderson as Mrs. Danvers.
You've nothing to stay for. You've nothing to live for, really, have you? Look down there. It's easy, isn't it? Why don't you? Why don't you? Go on. Go on. Don't be afraid. Whenever you touched me, I knew you were comparing me with Rebecca. Whenever you looked at me, or spoke to me, or walked with me in the garden, I knew you were thinking, this I did with Rebecca, and this, and this. Oh, it's true, isn't it?
You thought I loved Rebecca? You thought that? I hated her.
Selznick test Dorothy McGuire.
I heard the phone. I came back. You always said I'd listen once too often.
Cut. I came out to California in 1943, and I didn't realize that there was a David Selznick empire, which there was when you came out here.
If David Selznick said something, or if David Selznick was going to do a picture, that property was important, those stars were important, and there was a whole principality that really belonged to David Selznick.
He created a sort of an aura, I think, around his own studio and his own people who worked for him. I think they were considered Selznick players and Selznick technicians and Selznick pictures were considered something special.
David was wonderful with his players and his stars. He had perhaps a paternalistic quality. He felt that we were set apart. He loved us very much. He lavished gifts upon us. He sometimes chastised us.
He was accused by some people of meddling then, but we were delighted to be protected by such a boss. He took great personal interest in all of our problems.
And you trusted him very much. You felt that if you somehow were in rough times or got into trouble, that you could go to David. And you felt also that he would hold your confidence. And in a land where confidences are exchanged daily, this is rather rare.
Phyllis Walker of Tulsa, Oklahoma tests for Selznick and is transformed into the star Jennifer Jones. She will later become Mrs. David Selznick.
Look, Jenny, the canvas.
Canvas?
David Selznick.
A star personality is nothing that can be created. On the other hand, once the personality is discovered, he or she must be given the right opportunities, very carefully managed, very carefully cast, and protected.
Eben, promise you won't forget me.
In Portrait of Jenny with Joseph Cotton, Jennifer Jones is cast in a role of ethereal innocence.
Am I your girl, Lou?
Of course you're my girl.
In Duel in the Sun with Gregory Peck, Selznick casts her as a passionate wanton.
No, if I'm not good enough to marry, I'm not good enough to kiss.
Come here, you bobtail little tweak. That was bespoken, ain't we?
Wouldn't do no harm to tell folks, would it?
Sure would.
Can we tell him soon, Lou? Can we tell him Saturday at the barbecue?
Sure we can. Why not? Hey, what you got here?
Something the sin killer gave me. He said it'd keep me sweet and clean as the first milk.
Who cares about milk? I don't want no milkmaid.
Did?
Yes, Senator.
Listen carefully now. Sound every bell from here to Blue Hills Ranch. I want every wrangler, every cowhand, every man and boy on Spanish Bit down there at the East Fence. And I want them there fast.
Yes, sir.
Duel in the Sun with an all-star cast that includes Lionel Barrymore and Joseph Cotton is a Western of epic scale. David Selznick comments.
Duel in the Sun, this was simply, from my standpoint, almost more than any other film I've made, an exercise in production. Seeing how successful Westerns were, I decided to create one that would just contain more spectacle than they've ever had in a Western and combine a violent love story with it. I felt that if the two elements could be combined, there was no reason why I shouldn't have. Great success. It was rather fun doing it, tongue-in-cheek. Instead of having one gun duel, I had, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. Instead of having 100 horses, I had thousands of horses. Just multiplied everything, but it turned out to be an enormous success, despite the fact that it received the worst notices of any picture I've ever made.
Are you with me? All right, then. Come on!
So that was a part of David, too, the
Gregory Peck.
The sense of doing things in a big way, the fun of movie making, harking back to the golden age of Hollywood, the 20s and 30s. Like a big boy in many ways, intelligent boy, energetic boy, but still a boy with a wonderful toy that he enjoyed playing with.
In addition to his other gifts, David Selznick had an absolute genius for publicity. I think he was the best publicity man in the world. He had really a sense of it. He enjoyed it, and he knew what would attract the public. I don't know whether many people remember, there was an absolute fever pitch when Gone with the Wind was about to be done. They said, now who's going to play it? And people took it awfully seriously, and it was a big thing. And he organized a great big talent hunt for girls.
Oh, now, Miss Scarlett, come on, be good and eat just a little.
I'm going to have a good time today and do my eating at the barbecue.
If you don't care what folks says about this...
Unknowns and established stars, like Jean Arthur, are tested in a countrywide search for a girl to play Margaret Mitchell's Civil War heroine, Scarlett O'Hara.
Mother's a lady and she always eats at parties.
When you get mad, you can eat too.
Ah, fiddle-de-dee.
Fiddle-de-dee.
Joan Bennett.
Ashley Wilkes tell me he liked to see a girl with a healthy appetite.
What gentlemen say and what they think is two different things.
I seem to have made tests of everybody. I don't remember the people who didn't make tests. They were varied and different, and some were excelled in one scene and some in the other.
Scarlett.
Now let's do it once more. Come on, let's do this once more. And don't move your mouth. Don't cut it. Don't move your mouth. Just look at it. Let's go. Now wait a minute. Where I say camera? Second marker. Camera.
A young hat model named Edith Mariner, later to be known as Susan Hayward.
Scarlett. What is it?
I love you.
Isn't it enough that you've gathered in every other man's heart here today? Must you have mine, too? You cut your teeth.
Don't tease me now, Ashley. I do love you. I do.
Scarlett, you mustn't say such things. You'll hate me for hearing them.
Oh, I could never hate you.
Lana Turner.
I love you.
She tests under the name of Judy Turner.
Isn't it enough that you've gathered in every other man's heart today? Must you have mine, too? You cut your teeth on it.
Oh, no, don't tease me now, Ashley. Oh, I do love you.
Paulette Goddard.
I love you.
Frances D.
I love you. You're afraid to marry me. Why, you'd rather live with that stupid little fool who can't open her mouth except to say yes and no. And raise a passel of mealy-mouthed brats just like her.
And raise a passel of mealy-mouthed brats just like her.
You mustn't say such things.
Oh, I mustn't be damned. Who are you to tell me that I mustn't? And you made me believe that you wanted to marry me.
Scarlett,
why, it's true, you did. And I shall hate you till the day I die. And I shall hate you till the day I die. I can't think of a name bad enough to call you. You...
Meanwhile, Selznick proceeds with plans for the most ambitious filmmaking venture in history. By special arrangement with MGM, Clark Gable is borrowed to play Rhett Butler. But on the eve of production, Selznick still has no Scarlett.
And so the day came, however,
Selznick's publicist, Russell Birdwell,
when we had to start the picture because of our commitment with MGM for the services of Clark Gable. And so we all assembled on the back lot of Selznick International to watch the burning of Atlanta. And during the height of the fire, David's brother, Myron Selznick, an agent and a very illustrious one, showed up. And with him, there was a woman. And Myron kept tugging at David's coattails, saying, David, David, I have brought to you Scarlett O'Hara, and I want you to meet her. David kept trying to hush him, saying, shh, shh, Myron, I mean, the cameras are turning. Myron said, I don't care about the cameras turning. You don't have a Scarlett O'Hara, and I brought it. And Myron, to try to drive home his point that he didn't have a selfish or an ulterior interest, kept saying to David, but David, this girl isn't even a client of mine. This is Scarlett O'Hara.
Miss Vivian Lee!
With an English girl as Scarlett in December 1939, Gone with the Wind's ready for the waiting public.
The one and only Rhett Butler, Mr. Clark Gable.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I am here just as a spectator. I want to see Gone with the Wind the same as you do. And this is Margaret Mitchell's night and the people of Atlanta's night. Thank you.
May I presume at this time, Mr. David O. Selznick.
3 years of effort have led to this moment. If Atlanta, which is the final judge, approves our efforts, these labors will not have been in vain.
Against the epic backdrop of the Civil War, the personal saga of Scarlett and Rhett.
You was divinely, Captain Butler.
Don't start flirting with me. I'm not one of your plantation beaux. I want more than flirting from you.
What do you want?
I'll tell you, Scarlett O'Hara. You'll take that Southern Belle Simple off your face. Someday I want you to say to me the words I heard you say to Ashley Wilkes. I love you.
That's something you'll never hear from me, Captain Butler, as long as you live.
Scarlett, look at me. I love you more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Scarlett, kiss me. Kiss me once.
You low-down, cardly, nasty thing, you. They were right. Everybody was right. You aren't a gentleman.
It's not that easy, Scarlett. You turned me out while you chased Ashley Wilkes, while you dreamed of Ashley Wilkes. This is one night you're not turning me out. I want peace. I want to see if somewhere there isn't something left in life of charm and grace. You know what I'm talking about?
No. I only know that I love you.
That's your misfortune.
Red, you go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
It is David O. Selznick's greatest triumph. For one of the great pictures of all time, that would also prove to be the most popular film ever made, 10 Academy Awards.
Need I say it is a privilege and an honor to announce this winner, Miss Vivian Lee in Gone.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I were to mention all those who have shown me such wonderful generosity through Gone with the Wind, I should have to entertain you with an oration as long as Gone with the Wind itself. So, if I may, I should like to devote my thanks on this occasion to that composite figure of energy, courage, and very great kindness, in whom all points of Gone with the Wind meet, Mr. David Selznick.
The essential thing about David Selznick was his exuberance, that he was simply crazy about making movies. He was a romanticist. He liked love stories between men and women. Maybe that's why, in a sense, after the war and after the bomb and when the world took a change, not necessarily for the better, he found it harder to find subjects and to continue to make films.
For 9 years, Selznick looks for a subject to which, as he says, he can devote all his energies. At last, in 1957, he finds it in A Farewell to Arms, Ernest Hemingway's epic love story of World War I, in which he casts Rock Hudson and Jennifer Jones. Says Selznick, it will be produced in the tradition of Gone with the Wind. 8 years later, Selznick will die with A Farewell to Arms, his last film.
I said to him once, perhaps he ought to try a simpler picture sometime. Start off with a couple of kids on a park bench and see what he could make out of that. And he said, "Oh, that's not for me." He said, "The trouble with me is that I made my masterpiece when I was quite a young man, Gone with the Wind." He said, "I know that's going to be the lead line of my obituary." He said, "Every time I make a picture, I'm trying to top Gone with the Wind." Well, he didn't, but he didn't have to, because he made one among others, but he made one supreme classic film, and certainly left a very powerful mark on the motion picture industry and on the history of motion pictures.
Motion picture history cannot be stored away forgotten, for film is a living thing. And although filmmakers die, films have lives of their own.
Alexei, I had to come.
Say it.
Vicky Lester.
Say it again.
Vicky Lester.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Last night, I dreamt I went to Mandalay again.
War, war, war. This war talk's spoiling all the fun at every part of this place.
I beg your pardon. I thought you were another girl. Who are you?
I think I'm your daughter.
It's a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. It's a far, far better rest I go to.
Darling, you will be good to me, won't you? You will, won't you? Because we're going to have a strange life. But it's the only life I want.
In the tradition of quality was the Selznick slogan. His was also the romantic tradition that helped shape a Hollywood era that's over. From Madeline Carroll and Ronald Colman on A Marble Staircase to Rock Hudson's Walk in the Rain. A romantic beginning and a fittingly romantic Selznick close.